Hi everyone, this is Eric, and welcome to another episode of Oh, Go On Then, Here Amongst Friends. Today I introduce you to a friend of mine, John. He is so kind and honest and vulnerable that one of my only complaints of him as a friend is that he's nearly too kind. John is the co-founder of an organization called Gather, and they work in sanitation infrastructure. So what that means is that they gather and share data so that toilets and waste systems are designed in developing cities that reduce disease and ensure healthy communities. Fortunately, his background in sanitation helps expand on my question about folding and scrunching toilet paper and brings it to a much more mature level, where for quite a while we talk about the process of trying to improve the sanitation environments for 2.5 billion people that do not have safe sanitation. Something that he convincingly shares as a basic human right. Now, I was moved by his answer midway through the conversation about the universe knowing him, that he feels and knows that he is known and seen, loved, and created with value, and that in and of itself is a remarkable thing. Now, later on, he discusses the time when his father died, and he likens it to the closing of the curtains in the theater, where he felt the curtains would not be opened the next day, but they were opened, and life continued, and in their own way, the family continued with new milestones, and what that was like. This is a longer conversation than normal, but friends, good conversations cannot be rushed. So you'll notice midway through the conversation that, like other podcasts, my video cut out, and so that means that I have to go back and edit some of the recordings. So forgive me for the technical glitch. I hope to improve this in future podcasts, but it's the conversation that counts. And I think that we should get started, and I'm very excited to introduce you to John. Hi everyone, this is Eric, and welcome to another episode of Oh, Go On Then, You're Amongst Friends. And today, my friend is John, so I'm very happy to introduce you all to John. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all too. And nice to see you too,
Great.
Eric.
Hey, thank you. All right, so John, first question, red or blue?
Blue.
Why?
Poetically, because it's the color of the horizon, but
Okay.
practically, because it means that I align with the Conservatives in the UK and the Democrats in the US, and that makes me feel at home.
Explain that. There's a difference. I mean, Conservatives in the UK, is that similar to the Liberals in America?
Not really, but it's where I feel I'm able to establish my tent and try and win people over to my argument, where there's maybe a little bit of alignment. So yeah, you could easily read into a lot of contradiction in that first answer, but start as you mean to go on. Would be.
I get that. Now, you live in a tent. What is that like?
Oh, my metaphorical political tent. Well, it means you can move around, If you don't like the company of the people who are in the field with you, you can think, okay, I'm going to move slightly over this way, where the water's cleaner.
Do you ever wear blue?
I wear less blue now. Like, it probably features as like a background color, maybe, looking at what I'm wearing now. But no, I don't wear that much blue. And if I wear like blue jeans, then they need to be dark blue jeans. I hadn't really realized that I was that particular before, but it turns out I am.
And you said that you don't wear very much blue now. So in the past, were you a blue on blue type of guy? Denim on denim? Denim vest?
Never denim on denim, because I wasn't sure I could pull off the denim jacket look, because I felt like people would just laugh at me. So I admired it from afar, but never attempted myself. Yeah. No, more like blue shirts, a lot of blue collar shirts, a lot of blue collarless shirts, a couple of blue roll necks back in the day, but I've tried to mix it up a little bit. Like, I wear a lot more color now, a lot more variety, and a lot more pattern and print than I think, I've ever worn. So,
do you miss those days of the collared, the collarless, the rolled neck, the turtleneck? My gosh, that sounds like a lot of blue.
Do I miss those days? No. I think I express myself better through my wardrobe. I'm hearing what I'm saying and I'm not liking it that much, but it's me, so we're gonna keep going.
Well, I am aware that you've thought a little bit about these questions, so I thought that I would try to
Throw me off question
go
one.
off
Yeah,
go off
I'm
script.
enjoying it.
Next question: do you fold or scrunch your toilet paper?
I scrunch.
Really?
Yes.
Now, have you ever thought about that prior to this question?
I have done, mostly because my line of work is in the work of sanitation, and part of that is kind of the behaviors of sanitation, which might sound a little bit weird to some people, but it's really important when you think about what kind of toilets you're installing in different areas because different people have different practices. So I have often thought about it. Actually, when I told one of my housemates that this was going to be one of the questions, they immediately went, "You fold, don't you?" And I think because I'm so neat and orderly, there was this expectation that I fold, but I don't. I scrunch. So, my one little bit of rebelliousness.
So one kind of before we move on, now
Sure.
you do specialize in sanitation on a global scale, really. So what is your hope with this sector? Like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to minimize fecal smear?
I mean, that's not Gather's specific mission.
But you personally, not your organization, but like, why do you care?
Why do I care? Because, well, there's an element of, so I first came across the problem of the global sanitation crisis, as at Gather we would label it, which in effect means about 2.5 billion people around the world don't have access to a clean, safe, working toilet. So that's not just the toilet in itself, but then all the other stages of making sure that waste is looked after. I first came across the issue when I was looking for what are some of the problems that are most undersolved, underfunded, and most protracted. And time and again, sanitation hit those parameters. And I think what's fascinating is that everyone talks about like children, especially girls, need a good education. People need safe places to work. Communities need to be clean. Households need to be clean. And so we often talk about provision of clean water, building good schools, infrastructure, but we rarely talk about sanitation. And the impact of the lack of sanitation around the world impacts almost every other key indicator we're looking to improve, whether that be health or education or environmental cleanliness or anything like that. And so for me, it feels like a real base need that is often overlooked because it's unglamorous. But actually, if we fix that, it would provide a much better platform for communities and cities to be able to flourish. So I think that's what's really exciting about the sector. I think as well, it is a sector where there can be a huge amount of job creation because you need engineers, you need people who are able to create product out of the waste. You need people who are good at sales in order to kind of be able to engage people. You need people who are good at behavioral change to encourage people to use methods of sanitation that are safer, all of that kind of thing. You need good policy people. You need all over. So actually, it's brimming with opportunity for people to understand their potential too. But it's often not the first place people go to because of the stigma associated with sanitation overall. So I think that's why I'm particularly fascinated by it, and love the potential that is hidden within it. Yeah.
Wow, it didn't even occur to me how encompassing sanitation is, But I mean, if you have over 7 billion people likely going to the restroom every day,
Yeah,
that's a lot of people.
that is a lot of people. And you got to ask the question, where's all that waste go? Yeah, something to ponder on.
Now, when you say the practices and behaviors of sanitation, what does that mean? Are you asking whole demographics if they fold or scrunch? Or is that the behavior that you're trying to find out?
No, it's not the predominant behavior, but some people don't use toilet paper at all. Some people will just use water. So they'll either use their hand or they'll use bidet or they'll use kind of like a jug system. But if toilet paper is provided, then at some point you're going to have to work out maybe how much is being used. And I think probably scrunching uses a bit more than is economically efficient. So yeah, but it's very minor. And anyway, I'm kind of I'm aware of sanitation behaviors. We focus more on the data side of things and like the location of it. So it's something I'm aware of, but not fully involved in. Some of my friends have a lot more chat that they could give about this, which is fascinating, but a bit weird at dinner times, you know?
Now, in a context where they are using toilet paper, first of all, if it does become available, is there a uptake on it, or like the changing of behaviors,
Um,
or do they say, "I'm not used to that. I'm not going to use it"?
it really depends. So I think the kind of predominant behavior change is that people want to have flush toilets because they symbolize, I guess, like a certain level of urban development. So I think that's more what people would look towards is like, oh, is this plumbed into a sewer line? Does it flush? Does it have running water? Is there a tap within vicinity of the toilet unit itself? Probably more, I think people would be more focused on that. I would have to ask some people though, to kind of double check, but that would be my kind of assumption.
So
because sometimes it's linked with kind of religious or other like similar behaviors as well, or similar reasons that they may like wash instead of wipe, and so yeah.
So in a place where there would be toilet paper usage, do you know the amount of people that? I mean, do you know the quantity of toilet paper used in a certain area, for example, if they have pipes and things like that? So you could say this neighborhood scrunches, this neighborhood folds, and I can tell based on the usage.
So sadly, we haven't got to that granularity yet. We're just trying to work on location of toilets and then on waste collection services. But in about 15 years, we'll definitely go on the Eric kind of equation and work out whether or not people are folding or scrunching. I bet there is some data out there somewhere, some kind of micro level study. It's amazing what people in this sector research and the implications it then has on kind of improving sanitation overall. But yeah, we don't do that. It's probably unlikely that we will for a while. Not to invalidate your question though.
I do have one last sanitation question, because this is what you specialize in. This whole podcast was to rope you in to talk about sanitation. Is if somebody does have a system that does flush, that they do have running tap, running water, things like that, do they transition to use toilet paper, or do they not? Are they correlated, or does the sociocultural / religious practice impact that?
I don't think that a transition is guaranteed. It's not that better sanitation is necessarily sanitation with wiping and toilet paper. So oftentimes if you go to toilets in cities and countries or where they would kind of predominantly be wipers, then you'll often find that there will be a kind of a bidet or hose or similar provision provided in the toilet. So I think they try to adapt that in as much as possible. Obviously, the real difficulty is water availability. So sometimes I think some areas have tried to encourage a move towards wiping, but I would have to look into that a little bit more. I'm feeling incredibly rusty on this particular part of the sanitation world. So yeah.
You're more knowledgeable than I am. I like that you call them wipers. That makes me laugh. Do you actually use that on a day-to-day basis?
I don't use that on a day-to-day basis. For a while, we used the phrase fecal sludge quite a lot, and then that only got trumped by fecal smear, which are both like really important phrases within the sanitation world to understand like what's going on. But it's just, well, there's a taboo around sanitation, right? And that's part of the problem and part of the kind of the unpleasantness and unsexiness and just repulsion to it means that people don't talk about it, so people aren't as aware about it. So it took a while to get over that. Now I can kind of, I'm very confident about talking about the management of human fecal waste for the betterment of society. You know, it's important.
Just to clarify, fecal sludge and fecal smear, what is that?
So fecal sludge is the waste once it has left the toilet and is often mixed with some liquid as well, not always, and it's kind of a name that refers to the human waste that would normally end up in a sewer, but because of a lack of sewers and because of predominant use of pit latrines or septic tanks. It needs to be therefore kind of collected and then transported, treated, and either reused or disposed of safely. And when I say reused, things like compost or fuel, that kind of stuff. A fecal smear is when fecal waste impacts the what would be called the toilet interface. So we would know that as the toilet bowl. Sometimes it would be a squat pan, and when it hits that, and then requires an element of cleaning to remove it, because that then impacts the overall aestheticness of the toilet, and that massively impacts whether people want to then use it, particularly if it is shared. You don't want to use a toilet that smells or has a kind of unpleasant appearance, and so therefore you've got to make sure that that toilet is regularly maintained, regularly cleaned, and so the incidence of fecal smears can massively impact the ongoing use of that toilet. Things that I think that you and your podcast listeners never thought they'd hear, certainly not this early on in chat. So, if they've made it this far, then bravo to them.
I know, exactly. If you're going to do behavioral change, like public service announcements, I would highly recommend the fold and scrunch scenario. And then maybe leave it up to the people.
Well, I'm not a behavioral change specialist, and fortunately, Gather is not really involved in that, and so therefore won't have to let you down by not doing that.
Okay, next question: big spoon, little spoon.
Well, if you go to a fancy dinner and there's loads of cutlery, and if you're not careful, there's that one outlier that never really gets used by anyone. That's me. So I'm just by myself, very comfortable in the bed by myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The outlier.
The outlier.
So no touching anything. When you say that, you mean the dessert spoon up at the top?
Maybe that might be the one that you never touch. It might be the weird butter. It might be that fish fork, knife, spoon thing.
Wow. This also indicates that there's a lot of cutlery in the bed. That's another issue, I think.
So I hadn't foreseen that, but I'm now slightly horrified at the image that I've conjured, that I sleep in this massive multi-person bed, and I'm clinging on to the bed covers at the end. That's not the case. It's just me in my bed.
See, I was thinking about the spoon that doesn't get used, and I was like, oh, we're the opposite. Kidding. Should we move on?
It's your podcast, friend. I follow in your lead.
I'm gonna have to take that out, aren't I? What makes you laugh, John?
What makes me laugh? At this particular moment, you are making me laugh. I am a big fan of anything Schadenfreude, so laughing at other people's misfortune, particularly if they fall over in a way that, if someone is genuinely hurt and injured, then the laughter goes. But if someone is just a little bit bruised and it's mostly been humiliating, streams of laughter just erupt, and I'm the last person able to help that individual because I'm shaking so much at what has just happened. So anything like that, and I think that kind of translates as well into just embarrassing situations for people, I get a kick out of. And I say that with if I fall over, if I'm in an embarrassing situation, I think I reached the point at 19 where I just no longer really cared, and so was also very happy to make a joke about myself in those situations. So it doesn't have to be just other people. It can be me. It just is, it really makes me laugh. And I also really I think this is why you make me laugh so much, when people say the thing that just shouldn't be said, and it's not entirely offensive, but it's just borderline shocking. That I quite enjoy, because often it requires, and it has to be clever. There has to be that kind of quick wit element. It has to call to something a bit more. I enjoy that too. That makes me laugh.
Now, when you said that when you were 19, you kind of accepted that you could be laughed at as well. So what happened at 19? What was this big transition? Because that's a big thing where you can allow people to kind of.
So I had somewhat been forced to take a gap year because I didn't get into my first university of choice. Ended up working, which actually was fantastic, and just got an opportunity to train in a few different things as well. And I don't know, I just reached a point where I thought, I am spending so much energy trying to make myself seem like this perfect, pristine person, and it was just really boring. And I was like, actually, it's really fun to laugh at other people, and you get away with it more if you then laugh at yourself. and actually some of these things that are happening to me are quite funny, and I just need to lighten up a little bit. So it kind of felt like a bit of just a moment of I get to, I don't know, you know those moments where you suddenly realize you get to choose how you now respond going forward, like you didn't really realize before, and you're just like, oh, from now on, this is what I get to choose. Sometimes you don't do it, but I was like, oh, I actually get to choose to just laugh at myself and take myself less seriously. That feels massively liberating. So I did it. I mean, when I say I did it, I feel like I'm still learning to do that completely, but that's when I started.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of like giving yourself permission just to like find humor in life.
Yeah.
To be honest. Oh.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was always so guarded and wanted to be perfect and seemed to be perfect, and so therefore even my humor had to be perfect within a public setting, that actually my humor was then just a bit dull, and no one wants to be dull. Well, I certainly don't want to be dull. So
Yeah, and I don't want to tell you that you are.
Oh, thanks, friend.
Next.
What gave it away with my patterned shirt?
Your hair looks quite nice, by the way. It used to be purple just a month ago.
Yeah, it's still, you can still see a little bit of the purple tint, the pimple tint. That's not what I meant, the purple tint. I'm actually going to dye it again this weekend, but it gets quite luminescent within the first couple of days, so I wasn't sure that was quite, podcast appropriate.
Oh yeah, I would have said, hey, can we talk in a month?
Yeah, I know what you're like.
I know. I'm a bit shady. Okay, what was your first happy childhood memory?
And it's actually it's the earliest memory that I can recall. So I must have been about 3 or 4 years old. I was able to walk, but needed to hold on to my mum's hand for like stability and just, security. And we'd gone to the small supermarket in the town where I grew up. It was kind of slightly weird in that you kind of like drove down into the car park, which was kind of basementy, but not really. And then you had to take either stairs or an elevator to get up to the top. And that's how you kind of took your shopping trolley or cart for American listeners, kind of up and down from your car, from your car to the store. And something was wrong with the electrical light in the lift or elevator. And so there was a man from the supermarket who was then like shining a torch. And I was like, initially found this whole thing very annoying. Like, why can't they fix the lift? And then this guy was like, hello, my name's John and I'm here to help, and turned on the light. And I was like, people with John have superpowers and are called to do something big. I may not have phrased it quite like that in my 3 to 4 year old head, but I can just remember being like fascinated by this guy's role, and can just remember like really enjoying it and just not shutting up about it and being like, can we go back and go in the lift with John with a flashlight or torch for English listeners? And just, that being like a really happy moment. Yeah.
Kind of to realize the power that Johns do have. I mean, John, people named John, not John. I imagine you at 3 or 4 years old with your 31-year-old voice, deep voice, being like, oh, look at the power that Johns have. He's got a flashlight, something like that. And then going back to your 3-year-old voice.
That might just be the sound coming through here, but that sounded remarkably like me, and that's slightly terrifying because I feel like now you can somehow impersonate me to other people that we have in common. But I could have in common, as in friends of ours, would be the normal way of saying that. But yeah, no, I had a very high pitched voice. I had very blonde hair as well.
No.
Yeah.
Wow. My gosh, you grew up so much. It's really fascinating. Okay, should we go to the next question?
We should. You're going to have to cut out the voice, otherwise I'm just going to not be able to like focus.
So I can't do it. Does the universe know that you exist? Does the universe know you exist?
Yes, it does.
Really? Why? Why? How do you know that?
I mean, I probably wouldn't put it in the language of the universe, but I would say that I believe that I've been created and put here for a purpose. And so therefore I believe that I would call it God. That that there is reason to my being here, and so therefore that I am known, and therefore God knows I exist.
When did you kind of come to that realization that there was reason for your existence?
Oh, I think it was probably like within childhood. So I grew up going to church and Sunday school, and very clear the message that was given was, yeah, there's purpose to your life and that kind of thing. So I always knew that there was purpose to my life. I don't think I knew what my purpose was supposed to be for a long time. And I think even something I've maybe been working out, or not working out, but realizing in more recently, is that actually just being is enough of a purpose. Like I don't need to have done anything to have like generated my value. No, my inherent value comes from the fact that I've been created, and then I can kind of add on a little bit more value on who I am about and who I am, rather than, and that's much more important to work out as a purpose than everything else that you do. And I think that took me a long time to realize. I think as soon as I knew I was born for a purpose, it was like, right, what do I got to do? And then if I don't do it well, then that means I've not fulfilled my purpose. And then how do you then keep going forward if you know that what you've just done hasn't quite been enough? So I think I had to kind of unpick a lot of that in kind of my early mid-20s. Still now, I'm not still early or mid-20s. I was just explaining that's kind of been like a 7-year learning journey. Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought. I was thinking, oh yeah, you in your mid-20s, my goodness. When what does the universe think about you?
I think, like I said, that I am valuable. I am worth something. Yeah. I don't really know much more than that. But I think that's enough to know.
Yeah.
Or that's enough for me to know, at least. That's what I'm increasingly realizing. Like, that's to know that you are known and seen and loved and created with value is quite a remarkable thing.
Yeah, I think that the idea of having a purpose, like you had said, is this sense of like doing, is this sense of action. But it also, what I hear is that the sense of purpose is actually just being, like no movement. And what if that, it sounds like that is good enough? That's what I hear. It takes a lot of pressure off us, doesn't it?
So much pressure. Like for me, the way that I am wired to kind of, like, I have a bit of an achiever in me, or like a striving to be an achiever. And so therefore it's not just doing, but it's achieving. And that is so draining and so tiring and so setting yourself up to fail, because you don't then get to enjoy the fact that the moments that you trip over and fall flat on your face are both hilarious, as we previously discussed, but also the moments where you really work out who you are and grow and all of that. So yeah, for me, it's been massively liberating.
Yeah, my goodness. Next.
The only thing I was going to say is, like, I think more and more I like to find people who are completely different from me in many ways, but maybe have like shared thinking on that respect of like, are really concerned with who are they about and just kind of understanding their worth. Like for me, that's like massively life-giving, and is another way of like reminding myself, oh yeah, God, the universe knows I exist. It's been much more important than just surrounding myself with like, or trying to surround myself with people who would be achievers, because I'm like, actually I find that just really tiring. Like, really proud of all you're doing, but I want to be around people who want to know who they are and then are really happy with who they are. And that's a tough thing to work out, but like, so cool when you get to then have loads of people around you like that.
Now, with the sense of achieving, it's like there's something inside that's like go, 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 go. So when you do switch off, when you do find rest, what happens to that achiever? Is the achiever like, yes, I've rested, I'm resting right now. Look at me, I'm breathing, I'm following, I'm doing mindfulness. I'm, oh my gosh. Is the achiever happy that he's achieving, or quiet?
Um, I think it depends. Like, I think I'd be kidding myself if I was saying like, oh, I've got it completely down. You know, it never is like, come on, let's go, go, go. I mean, I'm the kind of person who can easily create a list of things I'm going to do on my weekend off to make sure that I've definitely relaxed. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is feeling a little bit like a kind of daily work task list. I think it's a bit of a balance. It's being able to hold it lightly. I think I am much less go, go, go in that sense when I'm trying to rest. Like COVID-19, when lockdown started here in the UK, lots of people were like, what skill are you going to learn? Are you going to learn to bake bread? Are you going to learn the guitar? I kind of set myself that I was going to learn a language, an instrument, maybe a creative skill. And I was just like, I was exhausted from week one and realized, actually, no, I have wanted to be able to slow down for a while. And I've wanted to be able to like read some books that I've been on my bedside for a year. I'm going to do that and use the opportunity that to kind of rebalance slightly. And so that's actually felt really good. It's felt really difficult, but it's felt a really good discipline to kind of rebuild in. So yeah, I'm kind of able to, I'm quite enjoying not trying to achieve in my rest.
Question 7. What cause or group of people are you passionate about making life a little bit better for?
So I'm slightly surprised that I don't have a like really clear answer for this one. I think if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have said this particular people who I'd been working with in Southeast Asia, or another group of people who've been working with in the South Caucasus, or I would have kind of identified a group. In the last few years, and obviously now I'm working in sanitation, so some people would, I think, maybe assume, oh, anyone who is without sanitation or whatever. But I think in the last kind of couple of years, I've just really enjoyed realizing, oh, actually, you know, we all need to be supporting each other. That sounds like some kind of really weak statement on a Twitter video. What do I mean by that? I mean, we all need potential pulled out of us, and I'm increasingly frustrated when people are not given that opportunity to have the potential realized in them. So it can be any part of the world, any particular group of people, it can be any particular, however you want to categorize people. Like if it's an individual who I feel, they're not really getting that opportunity to have the potential realized, their potential realized, then that riles me up and I suddenly get really compassionate about seeing them have that potential released. And I think I think in the past I perhaps fell foul of the whole being a voice for the voiceless type narrative, which I think has some merits, but I think then at that point it sometimes ignored the importance to actually know people who you're saying are voiceless have a voice, just no one's listening or giving them a platform to speak on. So I think more and more I'm interested in that. When someone says there's this group, I'm like, cool. So what are they saying? What are they saying? What are they wanting to say? Are we listening to them? Are we helping to create a situation where they can be listened to? Are we listening in ourselves before trying to get anyone else to listen, you know? So I feel my answer on that is a bit vague, and I hope not too preachy, but that's where I'm at the moment.
I feel preached too. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you for that. Yeah. The sense of like the individual and a larger kind of being disadvantaged or oppressed or things, I think.
Yeah.
Identifying that, I think also the sense of the speaking for the voiceless, that I think that is an issue with the hearer, to be honest, to say that somebody doesn't have a voice. But I think that person saying that needs to sit there and be like, actually, I'm going to check the hearer rather than the speaker.
Yeah.
Next question. What 2 positive words would you use to describe yourself? Don't look at your notes.
I don't have notes. I mean, I do have notes. Anyone who knows me knows that I'll have notes. No, my 2, I think I'm curious. And I think I'm hopeful. And I'd say they're 2 positive words.
What's a time when you thought, when you were younger, like, oh, I'm actually quite curious? When did you kind of feel that?
I'm always asking questions. My mum used to do I've got 3 older siblings and 1 younger brother as well. And my mum used to often be involved in kind of driving them back and forward to different youth groups that we were involved in and picking up friends on the way and stuff. And I seemed to always hone in on whoever was in the group that was interested in, whether it at the time be history or Star Wars or politics or whatever happened to be the thing that I was fixated on, musical theatre or just things like that. I would then hone in on that person and just ask all the questions that I wanted to have answered. But then it would then flip and then become me telling them everything that I knew. And I wasn't trying to, I wasn't trying to boast or brag about how much I knew. I think I was desperate to be seen to be curious and to be seen that I'd wondered what the answer was and went and found it. And therefore I was now telling everyone else. So I was kind of less keen on people knowing that I knew the answer and more that I had been that curious to get the answer. That makes sense? So like that probably from like age of 8, 9 sort of time.
You're quite precocious, my goodness.
Yeah, annoying might be another word. Irritating. But yeah, that was me. Still is me.
I mean, I'm 8-year-old John. That's pretty much me right now. Maybe when I'm older, I won't be.
But that, I mean, I when people ask a question, I'm like, I don't know the answer, but let's go find out. Or like, that's just so much fun. And yeah, sometimes it can be to my detriment because I'm never satisfied, therefore, with the answer that we might get, because I'm like, there must be more. There must be like layers to this. There must be other things we can go and explore before we're like 100% set on this is the thing. But yeah, I like that sense of going and finding out.
Well, and the sense of hopeful. When is that kind of like innate part of your identity? When has that gotten you through like a tough time?
I think I don't necessarily know. I think it's just something that's always, I don't know, really. Sorry, you slightly baffled me by that question. I think I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm an optimist. Like, I think I'm often very aware of the odds and very aware of this is going to go wrong, but I'm still always like, let's at least give it a try. And I don't think that's necessarily courage, but I think it's what if I'm wrong and actually this turned out to be good, then these are all the things that could await either me or us or someone else. So I think I think it kind of is linked maybe to the curiosity of like, I'm hopeful of what that answer will be. I'm hopeful of where we'll get to. And I don't know, I think I get a kick out of hope. That's not a bumper sticker that anyone's ever going to make. But what do I mean by that? He asks himself. Like, hope feels really good. I don't know if you agree, but when you feel hopeful, you're kind of like, okay, like there's no certainty, but hope is much better to, go to bed with than fear. There's a shout out to anyone called Hope and not called Fear, but I feel like I've completely ruined my profound philosophical point that I was making so eloquently.
I understand that. think, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Go on.
I think hope is great.
Yeah. I think, I mean, if you go to bed with fear in your heart and in your mind, think about how restless you're going to be,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think for me, I'm always fascinated by people who are in dire circumstances or difficulty, or for whatever reason it might be, physical, material, or it might be emotional, spiritual, whatever it might be, but they choose to hope. And I think hope is a choice, and therefore is quite disarming of all the other bad things. And so I find it profound to watch that in play, because it feels like a little bit of hope means all bets are off, even though the circumstance itself hasn't changed. As soon as someone decides to be hopeful about something, you're like, oh, something shifts, and that's really cool and really fun. And then you get to be a part of that together. And even if it goes cataclysmically wrong, you're like, better that we dared than we didn't. I don't know. Yeah.
And you get this, you can tell when somebody has chosen to hope.
Yeah.
You can feel it, I feel.
Yeah, and it's definitely, is contagious a good word to use in a time of global pandemic? I don't know.
I sneeze out hope all the time.
But yeah, I think.
That was a bad joke.
No, I know, I'm trying to.
Continue. Go on.
Wasn't quite, as with much of what you say, Eric, I'm often unsure how to follow, which I thoroughly enjoy and wouldn't want it any other way, friend. It's good surrounding yourself with people who have a little bit of hope. It doesn't have to be much, but just a little bit, and you're like, okay, we can do something. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think they don't have hope when actually they do. And so I love that conversation of like, well, let's find what you do have a bit of hope for and throw everything at it and then see what happens, you know? It's terrifying, but it's fun.
Next question, number 9. What is an event where you thought life would end, but then moved on?
So the night that my dad passed away, I can remember going to bed and being like, I'm assuming the next day is just never going to happen. And that being like kind of quite a profound, like, he'd been quite unwell for a while. It kind of rapidly deteriorated. We then had this beautiful evening where he was able to talk with all of us one-on-one as siblings, and a few family friends were able to come over and help. But it just feeling that finality of something, and it feeling like a full curtain falling down at the end of a performance, but no, okay, we're going into another act. It was like, no, this is the final piece. And can remember waking up the next morning feeling very disorientated because I was confused why things were still going. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I thought this was end scene, this was the end. So I think that's probably that's certainly the moment that resonates the most and was like the most impactful. I then feel slightly fickle because I can feel that sometimes in the middle of musical theatre, which kind of might seem a bit of a curveball, but like in the moment of epic storytelling, I can almost imagine that nothing else is ever going to happen, and this is the final story that is ever going to be told and ever going to be heard from my point. And I'm like always then a bit surprised when it's over. I'm like, what do you mean it's over? People are like, well, we've been here for 2.5 hours. But I'm like, but this was like the final thing. And yeah, I don't know. So one potentially seemingly profound and maybe a little bit heavy and a bit too deep, too fast. And then one slightly random over here.
That wasn't too deep, too fast. How old were you when your dad passed
I
away?
was 17. Yeah.
When did it start to kind of settle that life is going to continue on?
it felt like a kind of realization that was running at different time speeds. Christopher Nolan's film Dunkirk, where it's the same moment happening in like an hour, half a day, and a day, which I did not realize until about 3/4 of the way through that film, and suddenly went, oh, and just embarrassed myself. I had been so confused that entire time. I was like, this isn't making any sense. Christopher Nolan, you have done a terrible job. And then I suddenly realized what was going on, and I was like, bravo, you've done it again. This is wonderful. Anyway, sorry, I slightly sidetracked there. It felt like that. It felt like there were moments where, like the next day, some family friends came round and we had a glass of Prosecco and toasted my dad. And then, like a few days later, went back into school. And then eventually you just kind of go into your normal routine, and suddenly you're no longer living with a parent who's terminally ill at home, and then realizing that you're no longer living with that parent at all. And then life moments happen, but it all kind of feels like it happened at the same time, both that next day and that next week, month, year, decade. Like it's kind of I don't know, there feel like moments where I'm like, oh, I thought that had ended, but it's still going on because there's something new. But then like, oh, does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
You thought what ended?
So I guess like there are moments where maybe not in the same way that the night that he died, it felt like, okay, that was just like a complete end of everything. Obviously it doesn't feel like that at a week, at a whatever, but that thing where you say kind of realizing that that things are going to keep going. Often when there's a new milestone that is a milestone as a family without him, it's like we're keeping on going. And I'm almost having to remind myself that we actually have been keeping on going for a while.
Wow.
But slightly surprised by it. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. New milestones sound like you'd have to reconceptualize how a milestone happens and who's included in that.
And like they're always, well, often kind of joyous things. They're like when my first nephew was born, and then there've been 10 now nephews and nieces born, which is a lot of children. Wonderful, but a lot. Things like that, kind of weddings, things like that, which are like, oh, this is something that we're doing as a family that is evidence that we've been able to keep going, but also reminds you of this thing that felt very final. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that about your dad. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks for listening.
Sounds really difficult. Oh, I'm happy to. Wow. Question 10. Love and suffering are said to be our greatest teachers. What has each taught you?
This is a hard and horrible question. Just being honest, friend. I'm not saying that you're horrible. I'm just saying that this question is...
That's fine.
Yeah, it's like on a different level maybe to the whole washing, or not washing and wiping. That was my terminology. What was it? Scrunching and folding. I think that both of them have taught me that I have greater capacity to love and greater capacity to suffer than I ever realized or gave myself credit for. And I think I have greater capacity to help other people in their suffering than I realized I had capacity for. Yeah.
And when you reached that border and you went beyond, it's kind of like this new territory. Were you like surprised? And this, like, for example, with love, that's a little bit easier to talk about. Like, once you kind of got to that border and then you crossed it and you got to this kind of this new territory, this new place, what was that like? Did you think, oh my gosh, I'm bigger than myself, I'm bigger than what I thought, I'm overflowing? What was that sense of reaching the border?
I think I often don't realize until a little while after so I can't give you a in the moment response. But on reflection, I think it's that sense of, oh, like it's slightly terrifying sometimes when you realize that you're able to do something more than you realized, or that you had a greater capacity to love people than you realized, or anything like that. It kind of, I don't know, personally, I find it quite like not terrifying, but shocking. Like it kind of takes you back slightly because you don't necessarily, I don't recognize myself, or I almost immediately create a narrative of like, oh no, that can't have been what happened. There's no way that that's what you're capable of, or who you are, or that kind of thing. So I think often that's the initial reaction. It's the disbelief and shock associated with disbelief, but then there's a settling of, it's not as scary as I first perceived it to be. Yeah.
Same goes for suffering as well. You kind of,
yeah. I think that feels tougher in the moment. I think both can feel painful, but that particularly, I guess in its very nature, yeah, that feels like it's going to break you, or that you've already broken, and then you realize that actually you're just very badly bruised, and that's your way of your body actually is a sign that you are protecting yourself and able to cope with a lot more. Not that you want to cope with a lot more, but you can take a lot more than you realized.
Yeah. And you get to the bottom or whatever that is, and it's like, I'm still here, I'm still me, and I'm still alive. Shoot. Like, now what? Now I know that I can get to this depth.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm never fully aware of those moments. I suddenly have these kind of, I won't be thinking about anything in particular. I'll probably often be out walking, or it'll be a moment of, I feel like in moments of waiting, whether it be for a bus or a plane, or I don't know, just a kind of moment of pausing, suddenly be like, oh, that thing happened before. Oh, whoa, I got through that. Almost like on different social media where you get your kind of reminder of what happened a year before. I feel sometimes my brain just like brings something fully in front of me, and I'm a bit like, oh, that wasn't pleasant. Oh, but that was then, and I'm still here now.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Still hurts, but it's kind of like, yeah, no, I'm still here. Yeah.
This is an easier question. Have you ever thought you were going to die?
Yes, I have.
Really? Ooh, go on then.
Yeah, several times.
Several times.
And what's quite funny is that I was like thinking about this question, like this is going to make me sound like a lot more adventurous than I really am. But
Come on, JPA. You lived in the jungle.
Well, like I've had to ride in the back of a 4x4 for like nearly 48 hours to get to a remote jungle location to help run a particular project there for community healthcare, or have been on a helicopter flying into a frozen conflict zone to conduct research about what was going on, which sounds very kind of, I don't know, very daring and very dangerous, but at the time just feels very much like this is the job we have to do. But those times I didn't really feel like I was going to die. I can remember the place that was the frozen conflict zone, there being a state of emergency declared, and me not knowing and still walking around on the street and feeling like I have no idea what to do. I'm going to be okay, but I have no idea what to do, and that was more terrifying. But the times that I thought to die, interestingly, both happened on bikes. So one was like a motorbike it was more of a kind of, it wasn't a scooter, it wasn't a moped, it wasn't like a, Harley. Yeah. Is it a Harley? Is that a big bike? It wasn't one of those. This was going a different way to this part of the jungle that the organisation I was working with at the time was working in. And the only way to get there was about 17 hours on the back of one of these motorbikes, which just, I can remember I hadn't told anyone I'd never been on a motorbike before. We had flown 3 different routes to get to this final destination, driven in a Jeep for 2 days, and then we're on the back of these motorbikes. And just before we got on the back of them, everyone's like, so does anyone know what to do? And I was like, I don't. And they're like, and then someone else in our group was like, it's just like skiing. And I was like, I've never been skiing. And they were like, oh, don't know how to help you then. So it was like kind of given this kind of crash course on how to sit on the back of this thing, had my rucksack, and that was it. And to start with, it was fine. It was relatively normal road, but then we went onto some really questionable terrain that was really no more than a meter apart for a lot of it. And we were driving at night, and I was the only one in our group. We had maybe 3 of us had come from the UK, and then everyone else was from the country that we were working in. I was the only one to fall off, and I fell off twice, and like fell into the side of the mountain, but then had to like grab stuff to make sure that everything didn't just fall down. And I can remember at those points being like, this is how I go. This is just the end. Oh, and it makes me feel a little bit queasy thinking about it, because the couple of days later when we had to go back, we were going back in the daytime. Oh gosh, I feel quite sick. We were driving back, and it was so narrow, like I had fallen off just before this kind of turn, where if I'd fallen off then, I would have just gone down. So that was interesting. That was probably about, how old would I have been? 24? About 24. So yeah, that was interesting. 23, maybe I was 23. That wasn't enjoyable. But then the other time, well, actually there's then 2 times on a like normal, everyday bike. One when I was about 8 years old, that we lived up in Manchester at the time, and there was a beautiful park nearby. And from our house, we kind of would walk and bike along the road to this entrance, and the entrance then went down this hill. And I wasn't a very adventurous boy, didn't really like creating any kind of perspiration that would mean that I felt uncomfortable or would have to change my clothes or any kind of like physical exertion, mostly because I knew I wasn't good at it, and I didn't like not being good at stuff. But I could just remember being like, here we go, and just like going down this hill, and just remembering the bike going from underneath me into a tree, and me also going into the tree, and just being in like sheer pain. How I didn't break anything, I don't know. I had like cuts and scratches and like gouged the side of my kind of side, and was wearing a helmet, so my head was fine. And can just remember like all of my family being like, what were you doing? I was like, I'm never going to try and be adventurous ever again. So that was that's the other time. And then the time when I was the youngest, I must have been about 5 or 6. And this was learning how to ride a bike. So my dad, in his wisdom at the time, thought that I'd done enough kind of on stabilizers outside of our house, and had done enough without stabilizers on the road, that we should go up to this really I remember it as a massive hill. I can remember being terrified. I think it was called the Ridings, was this area, just this kind of massive green hill. And we were at the top, and I can just remember Dad being like, go. And my older brother went down and loved it. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And he was like, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. Out of the corner of my eye, I can remember seeing this like white fluffy dog. It was in the distance, and it was jumping around manically. And I was like, I think that dog is going to try and kill me. I don't know where the thought came from, but I became... And that actually, on reflection, was more terrifying than the time in the park in Manchester or the time in the jungle. Like, I can just remember being like, this dog is going to kill me. And telling my dad, I don't want to go. And he's like, go, you need to go. for like not giving any reason other than he just, you know how sometimes like I guess dads or parents or anyone of like who's older with authority, just they have a reason and go. So I can remember going and then hearing not that fast, which is not a kind thing to say to someone who didn't want to go in the first place, to then be told you're going too fast, because by this point, like at the top of the hill, so the only thing to do is either come to a complete stop and fall over or just to keep going. And as I'm going down this hill, this dog starts running towards me and the owners are like, come back, and it's like charging, and I'm just like living my nightmare of like, this is happening, this dog is gonna, I don't know what it's gonna do. Needless to say, the dog like jumped at my bike and kind of ended up going underneath the bars, the frame of the bike. So I didn't run it over, but it was fluffy enough that like fluff went everywhere. I fell over. I can remember my dad and my brother coming toward me being like, what did you do that for? As if the whole thing had been in my control and my choice to start with. And yeah, the owners of the dog coming over being like, we're really sorry, we don't know what happened, he saw you and he just ran. And I was like, I know he did. I knew he was going to do it. I don't know how, I don't know why, but that dog just didn't want me to be on this planet. And yeah, just being terrified. And then my dad being like, let's do it again. I was like, I'm not doing this again. I am not ever, and I don't think I ever rode down that hill again. But yeah, it felt like a genuine, this is how my life ends. Death by dog on a bike.
How old were you?
I think I was I must have been 5 or 6.
My goodness, little JPA getting tackled by a polar bear.
It was just, yeah. Looking back, it's quite funny. Like, it's less sick-inducing than the mountainside, but I can still quite vividly remember that feeling of terror and that weird knowing that that dog was going to come for me and then it coming for me. And to this day, no one believes me. Like, oh, you've added it to the story. It's like, no, I think you'll find that when I told it at 6 years old, but like, as it got me home, I was like, Mum, I knew this dog was going to try and kill me and it tried. Yeah, not good.
Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on cheating in a relationship?
What is cheating? I think that the temptation to cheat is inevitable because we're human, and because I think fundamentally I would say that love is a choice, not just a happy state of affairs and permanent emotion. I think you, to a degree, choose to love, and so therefore cheating is a choice as well. Think of the past, I would have been like, anyone who cheats is, I've gone into your weird voice, anyone who cheats is awful. I still wouldn't agree with their choice, but I think that in reality, we all hope that we're strong enough not to cheat, but probably more of us are unable to resist at least the idea, entertaining the idea, if not doing it. I don't think it's a good thing. I think that cheating is, I think it can be either just physical or emotional. But then it's kind of, it's not completely black and white in that I wouldn't always say if someone has cheated, then that's completely the end of, because sometimes if the person who has cheated has owned what they've done, is genuinely remorseful, is wanting to learn from it, and therefore is becoming a better person and like actively asks for forgiveness and puts down any armor they have and owns it and is prepared to go through what will be a horrific experience for them, but also the person they're wanting to reconcile with, it can bring out something remarkable, something that I don't think you have to or necessarily want to go through in that way. But I think it can lead to a beautiful story of redemption. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that therefore it's a good thing. And I think it should be avoided if possible. And I think that if you find yourself, let me put that in a different way, if I found myself in a position where I wanted to cheat all the time, not that I've been in that position before, but I think if I found myself there, I'd want to be asking questions of, why am I in this place? What else is going on? I think it's like like when you hit a bell, like there's that kind of like reverberating noise. I think sometimes maybe the cheating is symbolic of other things that are going on that you're not willing to fix, but actually by playing with it, you then break the bell. That's an awful analogy, but we're going to go with it. Do you know what I mean? Did that make any sense?
No, it actually doesn't.
I think cheating is choosing to cheat. I think finding someone else interesting, whether that be physically attractive or emotionally engaging or whatever, like we are all human and we all, like, as I say, love is a choice. So you have to daily actively choose that if you want to be in a relationship with another person. That's my belief. And so therefore I think cheating can often feel like it's out here, but you haven't really thought about it, or didn't mean to, but actually you have chosen it. You just maybe are less aware, but it's like the resonance of a much bigger decision that you're making in the middle, or something else you're not choosing to make. Like if you hit a bell and there's like that reverberate thing. I still am not really sure I'm being very clear.
Wait, I don't get it. Elaborate on breaking the bell?
Oh, I don't really, well, the breaking of the bell was kind of like, actually, if you cheat, then you're you're ruining the thing. But that wasn't really needed in the analogy. And so it kind of was superfluous, I guess. Yeah. I don't think I've been quite as eloquent as I would want to be on that particular topic.
No, I think you're fine.
But yeah, I think in summary, it is more complicated than sometimes we give credit for, but also it's not something that should be. I don't think it's good, but I think it can weirdly bring out the best in someone. So
yeah, I agree, even if it brings out the bad things for separation, which still sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 more questions. First, you're middle-aged and life is nearly over for you. Sorry. But what is a career you never pursued?
Well, that was brutal.
Yeah, but you're 31 and a half.
I am.
Okay. What is a career you never pursued?
So this is a funny one. Throughout late secondary school, sixth form, I was convinced I was going to become a doctor. I can't think of anything I'd be worse at than being a doctor. And I think it's good that I never pursued that career. So I don't feel like I've missed out on that, even though I talked about it for so long. A part of me would have loved to have gone into the creative world and maybe been involved in production for musical theatre or arena shows. And I know that might sound a bit of a caveball. A caveball? Oh dear. A curveball would be the correct phrase that I'm looking for, that, rather than creating some weird new thing of that was a caveball. A curveball. Yeah. It's always fascinated me, that kind of process of a team building and putting on a particular and wonderful show. It's just really awesome. And yeah, that would have been great.
What do you mean arena shows? Are you talking about a circus arena?
No, not necessarily. So some musical theatre is so intended for actually to be massive arena. So Jesus Christ Superstar was always intended to be an arena show. It was never supposed to be musical theatre. When they look at the touring of The Greatest Showman, which obviously happens in a circus for the majority of it, they are looking at kind of how do they do it on that larger scale, because it's not supposed to be small and, or I almost want to say kind of Victorian England-esque in the way that the theatre is set up from a West End London perspective. but also oftentimes they have, or production companies have taken kind of some of the big classics like Phantom of the Opera or Les Miserables, or others like that, and they have put on arena-sized versions so that you can bring in that many more fans and put on quite a spectacular, almost commemorative event of this is a big piece, and so let's honor it that way. Yeah, that kind of thing. But then also there are some just bands, artists, whatever the cool name is these days. That made me sound middle-aged. Great. Thanks, friend. I feel like you kind of planted that one in there. But yeah, there are some groups that I've gone to see their shows, and yes, the songs are great, and yes, the kind of the chat in between the songs are great, but just the way it is staged is phenomenal and adds to the storytelling. Like sometimes you can go to a show and someone is clear at the back going like this with the lighting, and you're like, oh, okay, and some a bit dodgy camera work, and it's kind of showing different people from the band performing, and you're like, this doesn't really, it doesn't add, and actually it's taking away, and this is a bit like, I've paid money to come here, like entertain me. And then you go to see someone else where, like, I mean, Adele at both the O2 and Wembley Arena, the videography and the lighting to make it feel intimate and then feel like you're in a portrait, and then suddenly make you aware that you're in this massive arena, but still learning each, like, added depth to each story. Or the 1975, who are obviously very different sound to Adele, but then kind of the way they use moving parts of staging and then lighting to tell the different stories of their songs, and you're like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, you have fully entertained me here. This has been worth it. That is just fantastic when all of that is brought together. And it's just like, you know what, I could have put on noise cancelling earphones and still known what was going on in terms of the storytelling because of everything else that you've brought into this. Yeah.
So would you ever make a career change?
Would I ever make a career change? I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like I necessarily missed the boat. I just don't know where I'd begin. I feel like I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of enthusiasm, but not much practical, know-how. So it would be fun to maybe shadow someone and do that. But I don't know. Or maybe set my ambitions a little bit smaller to like a small stage play or something like that to kind of learn the ropes, that kind of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't say no, but I'd need some guidance. So if anyone's listening, feel free to reach out.
Everyone, go to goonlen.com and fill out a contact form, and I'll get everything to JPA.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay, only 2 more questions.
Cool.
So, when you hear the siren of an ambulance, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
So this is really embarrassing, but I immediately am like, how can I help? And as explored in the previous question, I don't think I'd be a very good medic, and I can't think that I would be of any help wherever the siren is going. Like, good luck me running after someone to try and arrest them, or climbing up a building to get someone out of a situation where there's fire everywhere, or helping someone to stay alive. But I want to help, and I don't know, I just want to help.
What if there was someone lying on the ground and the medic is trying to revive them? Have you ever pushed the medic aside and said, look, I've got this?
No, I've never done that. I'm pleased that I asked what you asked. No. And I've never, if I've been up close to that, I guess, trauma situation, I've never then thought, what this needs is me. I've always at that point been like, wow, these people are just incredibly calm under pressure and are doing a great job, and aren't we fortunate and blessed that they are here? But if I hear a siren, I guess there's an element of being able to carry a narrative of like, where are they going? Sometimes I'll like add a whole sci-fi situation and be like, you know what, if in this moment I was a Jedi Knight, then they may be calling me to be like, hey, can you come and help? That's a little bit embarrassing to share, but that's sometimes what goes on in my head.
You thought if I were a Jedi.
Yeah. Again, would be awful at that particular role and function. But yeah.
This is my last question for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Who is someone that has always wanted the best for you and someone who cares about you and what you would become?
That person would be my mum.
Really?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
Go on then.
Come on then. I think at the ages of 0 to 10, you don't realize the role that your parents are playing in keeping you alive and providing for you and, yeah, just kind of helping you in your development and growth as a person. And then the ages of 10 to 20, you kind of, I wouldn't say detest them, but you're just irritated by them because you think they're trying to limit your freedom and don't get it and are not cool and are just like, you just underappreciate them, even though they're still driving you around, or this, I'm really speaking from my experience here, but are still like doing everything to kind of keep you alive and giving you opportunities. And you do say thankful and you know that you're grateful for it, but you've put on this weird persona of I'm going to be grumpy and ungrateful and entitled and all of that. And then you get to your 20s, and then you're suddenly like, none of those opportunities would have been possible had they not believed that I should go for them, and that they would and then make a choice to help me go for them, and just keep things going. I mean, I think I'm fascinated by my mum's story in that she was never really set on the idea of having children, and then met my dad, and as they were kind of, I guess, deciding that they wanted to marry and partner for life, they were like, what do we want our life to be about? And they decided together that they wanted to have a family that would go on and do bigger things than they were able to do by themselves or together. And so she then made that choice of like, yeah, that's what I want my life to be about, and went and did it, and would be the first to say that she thinks she's not done a good job, or not done a good job, but is hasn't done very much, hasn't achieved very much or whatever. But when I'm like, wow, no, your goal, you've kind of done that. You created a platform and a space for the rest of us to be able to figure out who we are and go and try and do what we want to do. And that's kind of cool. And I think is by far all of our biggest cheerleaders, all of my siblings, and not in a expectantly proud parent way, but genuinely delighted, which I find wonderful and baffling. I'm like, gosh, you were genuinely proud, and that makes me feel really good. And you're just like, actually, you have demonstrated time and time again what it is to be courageous, what it is to keep going, what it is to do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, but you believe in why you're doing it and what you could get as a result of doing it. And you will always put others first because you believe in it that much. And that's quite remarkable. I'm not sure that anyone else has ever come close to sacrificing or investing that amount of themselves in me. So yeah.
What a beautiful answer. Your mom sounds amazing.
Yeah, she's cool. I am. So to all of my friends, I call her Mama Ray, but I never call that to her in person. I don't even think she knows that I do that. So I'm always slightly terrified that whenever people meet her, they'll be like, hey, Mama Ray. And she'll be like, who are they talking to?
Yeah, I don't know if she'd be up for that.
I'm not sure she'd like it. as a nickname. So I don't really know why I've given it to her, but it's like a nickname I have for her to other people, which she'd probably hate even more. And now the world, through the avenue of this podcast, will know. So there you go. That's the way to repay someone who's invested in you.
Yeah, give them a nickname.
That they might not like. Yeah, no.
One day I'd like to meet her. So when will you invite me over?
My gosh, like if anyone has a gift of hospitality, it's my mum. Like the number of times that I've been able to just be like, hey, so do you mind if we can have these people over? Or like most recently, this must have been October. A friend got slightly stranded after all at someone else's 30th birthday. And I was like, oh, Mum, do you mind if they stay over? Because I've missed the last train. And kind of didn't flinch, was like, absolutely. And then kind of got home in kind of the 15-minute bus journey that it took to get back to the house. And like bedroom had been set up and pajamas had been put out and like requests for what do you like for breakfast. And I was just like, what is going on? Which is obviously wonderful. But you're just like, wow, that's kind of cool.
So the last question is for me.
Ending the conversation on
go in
you.
any direction that you want. I've got to answer and be honest. And so we'll see how that goes.
That's not on brand at all, Eric. Oh, should I just ask you?
Yeah.
So who is your favorite singer-songwriter and why?
Oh, good question.
I thought so.
I think that my first album that I ever got was Elton John's Greatest Hits. I think I might have been like, I don't know, how old was I? Like 12 or 14 years old. And I found him like unbelievably inspiring because he was so eccentric and so just like knew who he was and performed. And I would say that he was the persona that I admired the most. But when it comes to like songwriters, Bob Dylan, the album Desire is my absolute favorite album. Every single track is a whole story, and Hurricane is on it. Isis is on it. Another Cup of Coffee, like that. There's this one particular period of time. I must have been in college, and my brother and I listened to that album 1,000 times. So that album is the one that I turn on and yeah, I love it. But when it comes to concerts, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, my brother and I have seen him probably like 6 times in concert in Santa Barbara, and then like in Central Washington, there's this place called the Gorge Amphitheater. And we saw him there. We saw him in like we were like in the 3rd row in a few concerts, and then he had this smaller band called Mud Crutch, and they came and played in 2008 in Santa Barbara. But there's like my whole family has gone and seen him together, and so there's like this whole like Tom Petty side of our family that we just love him. So whenever I travel or whenever I'm homesick or whenever I just kind of need to feel grounded, I listen to "Learning to Fly" by Tom Petty, and yeah, everything like kind of seems like it's gonna be okay. Yeah, but there was a whole other time in my life where I knew like every Cat Stevens song, like inside and out. Father and Son, such a good song. Yeah, so that's that.
That's really cool.
Great question. Good. Well, John, this has been such a beautiful interview. I've loved how candid you've been and how you've navigated all of the different questions so well. I know that you'd had kind of these points that you wanted to highlight, but then the points of departure were so fascinating, and I really loved it. Yeah, I think that the influence of your mom is like, I can see that the sense of hospitality, the sense of like taking care of people is like who you are. And the idea of hope that I can see that just like that little bit in all of your actions. I can see that you're a very hopeful person.
Thanks, friend. I always enjoy talking with you. It is always a lot of fun, and I like that we're able to go from hilarity to profound meaning, sometimes in the same breath. So yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for asking the questions. It's been great.
Great. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of Oh, Go On Then, You're Amongst Friends. And thank you, John, for spending the hour with us. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Oh, Go On Then, You're Amongst Friends. All of the podcasts are made possible thanks to the generosity of our online community of supporters, who I see as the friends who listen along. I love that. I love that the podcasts begin with you, the listener. You can visit ogoonthen.com to learn more about the podcast and maybe consider supporting the creation of new episodes. You'll find the link to ogoonthen.com in the show notes below. To all of you who listen and have been so encouraging, thank you, thank you, thank you. Could not do this without you. And I look forward to our next episode together.